Happy Father's Day! It's been a somewhat busy weekend for my family. Yesterday was Father's Day, so we made a big breakfast and we spent most of the day playing family games. It was a bit different for Father's Day because my mom actually joined in for a bit. She usually doesn't like games and she opts out. I guess she and her sisters were scarred by the adults screaming at each other during the bridge or something when they were growing up, so they only like puzzles now. Also, my brother and I indulged our dad in one of those games he's always trying to push, but that I at least am not crazy about, Liar's Dice. At least we wiggled out a Zoom Zorch, right? Anyway, besides yesterday being Father's Day, the day before that was my brother's birthday, and I spent all day working on his cake. Cake decorating is something that really interests me. I watch a lot of cake decorating shows, and I always think it's so cool and something I would really love to be able to do. But I don't practice super often because my family is so healthy. I kind of feel like special occasions are the only excuse I have to bake cakes, unless they're something really healthy, zucchini bread, and even then it's usually carbs. And also, decorating zucchini bread would defeat the purpose of it being healthy also, because frosting and whatnot. Anyway, I asked Michael what he'd like his cake to look like this year, and he was definitely being facetious when he said to make it a dinosaur cake, but he never gave me a serious answer, so dinos it was. Now, Saturday was the first time I ever tried to make a cake in a shape other than the traditional cylinder or box, and I actually ended up using several techniques that I have never tried before. I spent the majority of the day doing the actual baking of the cakes, making the frosting and the filling and whatever. Now, Michael asks for a mango cake every year, and I've been trying different recipes each year in search of the perfect cake. This year, we tried using a banana cake recipe that's worked out well for us in the past for banana cakes, but substituting mango chunks in place of the mashed banana. Since I knew that'd be probably kind of sweet and heavy, I also made our usual cream cheese filling, but I folded in some plain whipped cream to lighten it, and I added some lime juice and lime zest to brighten it up even more. Half the mangoes we had bought weren't ripe yet, so the filling gel to go in between the layers was made instead by rehydrating some sweetened dried mangoes and then pureeing those. Once everything had finally finished being baked and cooled, it was time for the fun part, assembling the cake. I decided not to go too crazy on my first foray into custom shapes by trying to build Chris Pratt or anything like that, so I decided to go with a dinosaur egg nest. I had made 9 sets of 4-inch cakes, which I stacked into 3-layer cakes, and then I carved them into egg shapes. The layers were slipping and sliding all over the place while I was trying to frost the surface, so I ended up sort of temporarily sticking a chopstick through the center of each one just to hold it in place while I was frosting, and to chill while I worked on the nest and whipped up the glaze. For the nest, I had also baked a 9-inch piece of cake to be the base. I took all the excess cake pieces that I had carved off from the eggs and I crumbled them up with the remainder of the frosting, like I had seen people do to make cake pops. And I built them up to make the edge of the nest. So it worked out well color-wise that this particular recipe had called for a lot of brown sugar to make a nice brown nest. Then I retrieved the dino eggs from the freezer and I smoothed the outsides a bit more. I wasn't able to get them really smooth like I've seen people do online or in shows, but I guess it sort of worked out to have a natural sort of look. I put the eggs in the nest, I filled in the gaps with the rest of the cake crumble mixture. I then covered the nest with saran wrap and I drizzled a mirror glaze over the eggs. Mirror glaze is another technique I had never attempted before. My glaze ended up a little too thin, so I'll have to remember to add more chocolate or something next time. Not really sure how the chemistry works. My initial vision was for shiny black eggs with maybe a little swirl of color, but then it ran so much once it had set, we were left with a sort of jade green, which is a very pretty color anyway, so that's all right. After letting that chill, I cut the top off of one of the eggs so I could make it look like a dinosaur was hatching. I had sculpted the dinosaur earlier while the cakes and then the eggs were chilling. I made the substance by following a recipe for moldable chocolate, but I used some vanilla flavored white candy melts that I already had on hand instead of melting chocolate wafers, like the kind I had bought for the mirror glaze, because I used those all up on the mirror glaze. Making this material is another thing I had never done before. The reason that I wanted to make that, instead of using some of the leftover fondant that I still have from years ago when I first set out to decorate my mom's birthday cake, is that fondant is so sweet and we tend to dislike it. So, like, the cloying sweetness is just something I definitely want to avoid with my family all the time, which, as you can imagine, makes cake decorating difficult and cake baking. It's a challenge. Hopefully one I'll eventually rise above. Anyway, so the thought was that chocolate would be better than the sort of pure sugar of fondant. Unfortunately, by using candy melts instead of chocolate, I ended up negating my own logic and saddling us with a big block of sugar anyway. There was a small color mishap here too, where I was going to color the dino sort of like a greenish brown, but then the green super overpowered it and it became more of like a muted green color, which is also a respectable dinosaur color, so it works, but it's not what I initially was going for. Once I had the dino pieces arranged in the eggs, or on the eggs to my liking, I removed the saran wrap from the nest and discovered that besides the nest, the wrap had also shielded the bottoms of the eggs from the glaze. So then I went around and I added more glaze to the bottoms with like a chopstick. Finally, the cake was ready. There are definitely some areas for improvement. The green was so powerful food coloring that the dinos and the egg, they ended up pretty much the same color. The eggs weren't smooth, like that would really give a good effect for the mirror glaze, and the glaze itself wasn't very thick. Flavor-wise, the cake ended up being way more heavy than expected, and even though it looked like there was so much mango in the cake and the frosting was delicious when I tasted it beforehand, all the flavor from both of them got totally lost. It ended up just being really heavy and sweet, which was something I was trying to avoid. Next time, we are thinking maybe instead of trying to incorporate the mangoes into the cake itself, maybe we should make a very light plain cake and put all the fresh mango in the filling and on the top or on the side, and maybe that would actually work out to showcase the flavor better. I guess we'll find out. In the meantime, I've got a Tupperware of thin, supposedly black mirror glaze and a chunk of green, vaguely vanilla flavored moldable sugar to make some use out of sometime soon. So if any of you have any ideas for what I should do with that, please let me know.